Hi, I'm Seamless, and today I'm going to talk to you about recording this drum kit you see here. This was the kit that I have the previous video of a guy playing it. His name is Joel. He's a very good drummer. Um, this is going to be part one where I talk about mic placement and what that sort of means and how I made the room work. The room. It's kind of dark in here because like 80% of my lights are burnt out, but it's okay. We should be able to make this work. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this instrument by instrument. I'm going to play. I have it recording right now, so you'll hear the processed sound. I'll also play the dry sound. I'll explain why things are set up the way they are. Now, right at the bat, people who do this sort of thing professionally, you're thinking, well, don't you do it professionally? Like, well, yes, I do, but that's not really my whole point. Like, I have a studio originally because I wanted to record metal bands for a living. That was my whole point. I've kind of moved on to being more EDM focused, but I still have this room that I made, so I make use of it every once in a while for friends. So I don't really do it a lot, but I still do it enough to make it work well enough for my purposes. But people who do it for a living in actual full studios and do just this might look at what I'm doing here and see lots of interesting things just right off the bat in terms of stuff I probably could do better. Stuff like the overhead placement, the snare mic placement, the tom mic, pretty much all the mic placements. I mean, the kick drum is pretty much the most standard setup I have so far in terms of normal microphone positioning. Also, the fact that I don't have a bottom snare mic, but I do have bottom tom mics on everything. I don't know how well you can see that through here, but I'll show you what I'm doing with those in a minute. I am pretty happy with that kick sound, but let's start with the kick. Even though I'm in front, and I was going to talk about the snare, let's do kick anyway. So we have this whole thing going on back here. Now you've probably seen this a lot in other studios where they cover the back of the kick drum because that's where the mic's going in. And that's more or less what I'm doing here. What I have set up is two barrels of plaster with two cinder blocks on top of it. Let's see if I can just get the light in there. Now, the kick drum's not even on these things, but I actually set this up because my drummer for my my metal band, his kick drum, A, doesn't have like good legs, and B, he hits it really freaking hard. So that means it's always moving around. So I put these here to ensure that they're never going to go anywhere. You can kind of see, but the kick mic is just inside the porthole, and it's aimed at the center. I used to not do that because I used to not do this whole blanket setup. The reason we do this blanket setup is to reduce bleed. And other than just being a more neat mix, you're able to push things more extremely, I guess. You can do more extreme edits with things that don't have as much bleed in them. So yeah, that's pretty normal right there. I'm gonna go back over here to the snare drum. So normally when you make your mic in a snare, what you want is to have, like, the ideal snare miking would be to have the mic pointed 45-degree angle, the center of where you hit, which is usually the center of the snare drum. You can kind of see where he does that pretty well, and yeah. Again, as well as putting it at the center, you want it to be more or less completely perpendicular to the hi-hats to reduce bleed in the snare mic. Now, those are all things to worry about when you're doing stuff. But my philosophy in terms of miking drum kits is usually just damage control, which other technicians might just say that anyway. But like really, what I'm doing here is I'm trying really hard not to interfere with the player's setup. Like this drum kit absolutely would not work for me because I'm like 1.5 feet taller. I'm not that tall, and he's not that short. But we are of different dimensions, which means that I don't really fit so well in this kit. And I don't want to have. I want to be like move the snare or move the hi-hat to get a better snare miking position. Sometimes you'll see mics coming in from the middle of the front two rack toms if you have the standard kind of rack tom orientation. That's also, I mean, that works. That's fine. But from the hi-hat angle is also pretty normal. Now, what I would have done, I don't know if you can see here, this is a crash guard, which is actually a pretty miraculous thing. What it is a sort of a foam and hardened covering that you could put on top of a mic like this to prevent like, all the crashy things from bleeding into the mic because it covers the top of it. And when I do have room to put it underneath the hi-hat, like there's not enough room for it right now, but when I do have room, it does its job really, really well. And I would have used that, but it would have meant that he would have to move this higher or move farther away, and that would have interfered with his playing style. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to mess with that. So, and in the second part of this video, I'll go over the mixing that I did to solve the problems that this causes. So yeah. So let's move on to the toms. Lots of fun. So my whole thing about tom miking is to get the tom mics as close to the head as possible and as much as pointing down into the head as possible. And this has to do with what I do with the bottom mics as well. This because when you do that, what you end up getting is a lot less tone and a lot more slap, a lot more percussive sound, which is usually pretty good. I mean, especially because this recording that I'm doing is a metal band. So sharp and bright sounds are key for the drum setup. I also want to point out something about the dry sound. Here's all dry for a second. You hear that ringing sound? I can't actually hear it, but you're gonna hear it really good in the recording because the mics are all right there. And I'll talk about fixing that in post as well. So that's what's up with the top mics. Let's talk about the bottom mics. Going around behind you. Bottom mics. This guy's actually out of position. I really hope that wasn't like that when I was recording him. I don't think it was, but I might have done that, moving this around. I guess I'll know when I look at the recording. So that's the guy went over here. Like the top mics, I want to get these as close to the bottom heads as I possibly can. And the point of having these mics like this is so that you can reinforce the top mics with the fundamental of the drum itself. Because what we're really going to get out of the top mic, or the bottom mic, is just a low kind of doom sound. And it sounds like this, actually. I'll just show you what they sound like. And then here's the dry sound. So what that does is it removes having to have certain frequencies audible in the top mics. Because the top mics, we're going to have a lot of the slap and high frequency, which means we could turn the high frequencies down a little bit, and that prevents like the crashes and stuff from bleeding into it. But then also we can get rid of a certain amount of like the hum and lowness that doesn't sound good from the bottom without losing the tonality. So we can reinforce the whole sound of it with the tonality that we get from the bottom. And the bottom mics, by and large, don't have as much high end bleed because they're below the instruments, and they got layers of things in between it. I mean, sound transfers through it just fine, but it's somewhat more muffled. Yeah. So other things to worry about doing this top of mic kind of thing. Engineers that do top and bottom snare will tell you that when you have mics facing each other on the same source, you have to make sure to invert the phase of one of them. And I'll show you. I mean, I can visually show you why when we go to the next part of this video series. Is it the series? It's just 2? I don't think so. I'm not really sure. But basically, what happens is that this guy is recording sound oscillating up and down in a certain way, and then this one's going to record that same sound oscillating in 100% opposite phase. Well, not 100% because the angle's a bit off, but enough opposite that you'll lose the fundamental tone, clarity wise. So you have to invert the phase. Same thing with top and bottom snare miking. Overheads. Now, there is a science to overheads, but in this room, it doesn't really matter because no matter where they are, they're going to do just fine. Everything is a room mic in here because this room is so small and so not really conducive to this task that it's just going to be everywhere. Sometimes what I like to do is I have more mics, and what I'll do is I'll put an overhead like right here on the cymbals so that I can turn them down really, really low, and they'll only get each individual cymbal, and I'll kind of reconstruct what the room sound will be in post by like using convolution reverb or something, or just EQing all the different cymbal mics together. And it gives me a lot more control, and it removes a lot of the room sound if the room doesn't work for what I'm doing, which is kind of a lot. However, this worked out well enough that I didn't need to do something that extreme. Meanwhile, these guys could just kind of just be where they are. It's good, this is get your stereo image. You get a little bit of that too from the tom mics because the cymbals and crap are going to bleed through them pretty profusely. So the overheads and the tom mics need to be mixed together in such a way that they complement each other. Really, all the mics need to do that because they're going to bleed. And so if I accentuate 2K in the overheads, suddenly the hi-hats are going to be way too loud because they're coming through the snare mic at that frequency as well. So sometimes it's good to just actually remove certain frequencies from the overheads that if you just listen to the overheads by itself, wouldn't sound very good. But when the kit itself is taken as a whole, that's when the mixing starts to work out best for you. So yeah, that's it for this video. I hope I covered. I mean, I talked about everything that I knew that I was doing. If I did a good job or if I didn't know what I was doing, it's because I don't really do this very often. And again, my whole philosophy is damage control, which means I make mistakes and then I fix it in post. Yeah, because it's the future. So yeah, part 2. We'll talk about how I mix this in FL Studio. Oh, I suppose I should show you how I'm routing things into the computer. Still recording, right? Yeah. So all the mics are being plugged in, and they're going into snakes, which are going in through the wall here. This is a triple thick wall, so that's dark as shit in here. Can we see? 1 wall thickness, 2 wall thickness, 3 wall thickness. This is, yeah. And these walls are covered. They're stuffed with special insulation called rock wool insulation. Just Google it. It's very good stuff, especially for building studios. And here's the listening room, which you've all seen before, in its glorious mess. And over here are my 2 PreSonus Fire Studio projects. They can be daisy-chained to up to 3 of them. I'm using 2 for 16 total inputs. Only I'm using 10. I'm only using 10 for the microphones. 1 kick, 1 snare, 2 overheads, and then 2 mics per each tom. Total of 10. Really, the numbers start to increase when I do toms, because that's where I do the most multi-miking. Everything else only just has one mic, except for the overheads, which is just 2 mics. But I don't do room mics, because like I said before, everything is a room mic in here. Does not really benefit from having that kind of like spacious recording. Space recordings. Only the overheads have fan and power, but I turn fan and power on for the whole thing, just so I don't forget which ones have what. The Fire Studio projects have a particular kink about them, where the first 2 mic inputs are noticeably better than the rest of the mic inputs. So what I've done here is I put the most important mics in the first two of both of them. So like I said, I had 10 inputs, and so you'd think that, oh, I just did the first 8 and then 1 and 2 for that too. I actually just did 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, which actually makes it really easy when we go into how we make that work inside FL Studio. But so 1 and 2 of the first one, which is the bottom one, is kick and snare, and then 1 and 2 of the top is the overheads. Those are the most they're the ones that have the most clarity and the most tightness and sound response. Because the toms, they don't get used so much, and they can just be EQ'd to be to what they need to be, because they're going to be mixed into everything else anyway. But the overheads need to have nice high frequency clearance for the cymbals and stuff. And the snare needs to be as best as possible, and the kick needs to be as best as possible, because you need to have the most options for fixing them in post, which is what we'll now move on to in part 2. I will see you there.